which you all received upon registration. I think many of you already watched it. We heard from the filmmakers that they had like 60, 70 views or so, 150 people registered. So there are a few people who didn't watch it. I would warmly invite you to watch it. But now we just look at the 2-minute trailer, which will give us a little bit of an overview on what this is all about. So Luisa, please, can you share the trailer with us?
Something was causing all these whales to want to abandon the deep water and get the hell out of there.
One of the things about noise in the ocean is that humans are not aware of it at all.
Listening on the headphones gives you a headache. Within 10 minutes, you have to take the headphones off, and the whales can't turn the volume down.
They were trying to get away.
You didn't have to have a hydrophone to hear the sonar. I can't imagine what it must have been like underwater.
These companies damage the ocean without cost.
And the sound of all of those ships literally filled our ocean with noise.
There's a direct, significant correlation between the amount of ship noise and the physiology and the stress levels in these animals.
It seems like we are not able to do anything about it.
The one good thing about ocean noise is that when you stop making noise, it goes away.
We're putting the ocean at risk. And if you put the ocean at risk, you're putting all of us at risk.
Thank you very much, Luisa, for showing us the trailer. For those of you who have watched the documentary, this was familiar. I invite everyone to have a look. It's really interesting and very instructive. Now, without further ado, let me pass the floor to our Sirica chair, Tonino Pizzula, who should already be with us.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Christina, and thank you, Tobias, for an excellent intro. Of course, good morning from Strasbourg, where we are back after 16 months, and good morning to all the speakers, colleagues, and the participants. Yes, it's my pleasure and honor to welcome you today on the World Ocean Day to our event on the threat of underwater noise and how can Europe best address it. I'm addressing you on behalf of Sirica Intergroup, that with our secretariat, CPMR, and Seas at Risk organized event today. Big thank you to both. Our decision and this we will need to deliver, and our discussion today will come as a follow-up activity, as Sirica was already hosting a similar event back in 2018. Already then, we concluded that anthropogenic underwater noise has marked negative impacts on marine species, including crustaceans, fish, and mammals. Exposure has both temporary and long-term damaging impacts, including marine mammal habitat displacement, hampering long-range navigation and communication, in addition to other physiological stress responses. It has also been shown to affect human activities, including reported lower catches. Ocean noise pollution has greatly increased in recent decades, primarily stemming from commercial shipping, seismic exploration surveys, and construction pile driving. This pollutant is chiefly a byproduct serving no function, and when avoided, noise pollution ceases immediately. Furthermore, measures to reduce underwater noise are still scarce. Marine Strategy Framework Directive includes 2 indicators on introduced energy, including underwater noise, whereby member states are to establish threshold values of noise levels that do not adversely affect the marine environment. While the European Union's framework for marine environmental protection is one of the most comprehensive and ambitious worldwide, it needs to be beefed up to be able to tackle predominant pressures. Just to list some: overfishing and unsustainable fishing practices, plastic litter, excess nutrient, underwater noise, and other types of pollution. The directive has pushed for a better understanding of the pressures and impacts on human activities on the sea and their implication for marine biodiversity, their habitats, and ecosystems they sustain. The knowledge gained from implementing this directive was, for example, a driving force leading to adoption of a single-use plastic directive. Still, European Union member states could and should further improve their coordination, namely in determining the coordinated objectives and targets, having effective measures tackling the right pressures. Sustainable blue economy strategy of the Commission, on the other hand, while putting less emphasis on economic growth and more on environmental protection, still holds the promise of multiple ocean opportunities and contributes to a blue gold rush. The main question is how to enable better environment protection. That, in my opinion, should be our #1 priority, and reconcile it with increased demand for the further development of blue economy. Can we imagine an ocean economy that equally respects social rights and needs and the ecological boundaries? Moreover, would such a paradigm shift towards sufficiency not only allow reducing underwater noise, but equally carbon emissions and other problematic developments on the ocean economy? We know that the problem with the underwater noise is not that the ship engines or the drilling are too loud. It's there are too many ships, too much drilling, and too much activity overall, a level of activity that is still projected to grow. Today in Strasbourg, European Parliament is voting on the European Union Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, bringing nature back into our lives fire. We fully endorse the Commission strategy, but we need now concrete actions and ambitious legislative proposals to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. We call for the new European biodiversity law, similar to the climate law that would ensure good governance and steer the path to 2050 through a set of objectives on the protection of biodiversity. Seas and oceans are more than ever at the heart of the strategic issues facing European Union. Maritime policies will more than ever be at the heart of the climate issues, since oceans produce over time 50% of the oxygen we breathe today. Oceans also capture 30% of carbon emitted and absorb 90% of the heat caused by man-made carbon emissions. Oceans are also part of the solutions to global warming, for example, through marine energies. Maritime policies are at the heart of the food issues, since oceans provide a great biodiversity and a significant source of food, today producing 15% of protein consumed by human beings. And maritime policies are at the heart of growth issues, since according to OECD, the share of global GDP due to the maritime economy will double by 2030. Dear colleagues, seas and oceans will, however, only be able to provide solutions for the sustainable development of human communities if they are protected and healthy. Beyond, life on Earth is simply impossible without healthy oceans.
No.
With that message, and on this special World Ocean Day, I want to thank to everyone working on better protection of our oceans, and to all speakers and participants for their contributions. Thank you, and happy Ocean Day to everyone.
Thanks a lot, Tonino, for these very inspiring and insightful opening remarks. You said that there is too much activity, too much pressure on the ocean, which results in like noise, but of course also other stress and degradation towards these ecosystems we are wanting to protect. And as you rightly pointed out, today is the vote on the Biodiversity Strategy Own Initiative report in the Parliament, something we are very excited about and look forward to see unfold under the European Green Deal. And I would now like to ask Pierre Karleskind, who is chairing the Fisheries Committee in the European Parliament, on your view on the question of underwater noise, and maybe also, I know especially in the Renew group, there are some discussions on the biodiversity strategy and how to use it best to reduce the pressures on the ocean. So I hope you and your colleagues can play a positive role today on Ocean Day to get this strategy adopted. Pierre, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Tobias. Thank you. Good morning first to all. Thank you, Sirica, and thank you, Cisatrix, for organizing this. Thank you, President, Chair Tonino Pizzula, for hosting with me this event. As you said, this is a special day today. It's the International Day for the ocean. We all know that. This is also the day we vote the UN report on biodiversity in Strasbourg. You've just mentioned it. And I must notice that there is one paragraph mentioning the question of noise. It's one paragraph out of 89 pages. And it says, on the Commission to address light and noise pollution, including underwater noise. So you might say it is anecdotal, but what matters is that the topic is in the text. Why? Because we know that ocean pollution has impact. We also know that it has greatly increased in the recent decades, caused by shipping, by seismic exploration survey, or by construction, by driving. We have known for years, and what should we recommend now? As the Vice President of the Sirica Intergroup for Research, I would like first, of course, to emphasize that what we need is more funding for research in order to really understand the causes and consequences of ocean noise pollution. More funds must also come from the one impacting the marine ecosystem with noise. I would like to take a simple example. In a wind turbine farm that is currently seen some really interesting studies on the impact of noise on the development of scallops, for example. This is a question of environment, but this is also a question of economy, of revenue for the fishermen that are fishing this scallop. What is the extent of noise pollution impact? That is the question. We must build, this is the second point, on good practices. From a policy point of view, noise pollution has been covered by the EU Marine Strategy Framework Directive, the MSFD, as you explained before. In 2008, the directive was a very good step forward with clear indicators to establish threshold values of noise level that do not affect population of marine animals. But now it's important to build on good practices and share them. We have to share the techniques. It mentioned also in the directive that we need to take measures to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts of underwater noise on marine and coastal biodiversity. I think that we are all convinced that it must be done. And third, maybe because I'm the vice president for research, we have to find innovative solutions. To solve this problem, we will necessarily need to be innovative. Maybe the solution lies in establishing quiet zone or quiet time frames. This takes us back to my first point, more research. Only this will make us find this solution. But in relation with the stakeholders, in relation with the NGOs, in relation with all the ones that are implied and that live with the marine ecosystem. To conclude, I would like to just tell you a little personal story. When I was a young specialist in marine science, I had some colleagues in my very same office, in the very same office as me, just working a few meters from me, working on what? On noise pollution, especially on the mitigation of noise. And the idea was to create bubble curtains. This was a little bit more than 10 years ago. So I know from this day, I've been knowing from this day that solutions exist. And since then, they have created a company, they have created jobs, and they are proposing solutions. So this question is, of course, about protecting ecosystem, protecting our ocean, but this is also an economical opportunity. So now I'm looking forward to the great discussion together this morning, and I'm sure to see some innovation solution coming out of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre, for putting also the accent on the importance of research, of innovation, and also for mentioning this possibility of quiet zones or quiet time frames. So we have heard a lot of keywords. Our idea now was to have a Zeetings, which is a bit like a Mentimeter. It's just an interactive tool. We have put the link in the chat right now. You can see it. You can copy paste it in your search engine, and you can participate in the poll. And the question that we would like to ask all of you, everyone can participate, is what comes to mind when you think of underwater noise? We have heard already some introductory remarks, so you might already be a bit influenced by what you have heard. I would like to ask Louisa to put it on screen, what people are responding, and you now have a few moments to participate. Once more, to participate, you just have to copy paste the link that you see in the chat, Zeetings it is called, exactly, and then you can just type in the answer that comes to mind. What comes to mind when you think of underwater noise? Okay, so we see shipping. Shipping is a big answer that you're giving. Big ships, disturbance, military. Stress is also coming up. I see that some people must have watched the documentary, Unfair Anthropogenic Influence. We can maybe let it unroll for a few more moments, and I will let Tobias then harvest the results.
Yeah, thanks, Christina, and yeah, thanks to you all for participating in this little exercise, which is quite interesting. We have quite a few contributions, but I mean, I think the highlights are very clear. Stress from shipping. So stress and shipping are certainly the most prominent mentions here, followed by military activities, which is also a very interesting topic. And let's hope maybe we can touch on this as well in the roundtable discussion, because the military is also explicitly exempted from the MSFD. While, of course, in terms of stress from underwater noise, military plays quite an important role through military sonar and similar things. So thanks for your participation. That's supposed to be an interactive exercise as well. And that's also what we want to try to cultivate in the next part of the event, which will be the roundtable. So there won't be like PowerPoints or presentations as we often are used to in these webinars, but we have a very interesting round of experts from Commission member states, NGOs, European Parliament to address various questions. And you, as the audience, you are also warmly invited to ask your questions, and you can do so through the chat. And please also mention if you want to address this question to a specific person. My colleague Eleonora will harvest this and then bring it to our attention as moderators, and we will try to address as many of these questions as we can after the first round of statements and contributions.
Exactly. So without further ado, let's now go into the questions of the roundtable discussion. The first person that we would like to give the floor to is Bettina Taylor, who is an expert working on underwater noise for Bund, which is Friends of the Earth Germany for our non-German audience. So Bettina, you are chairing the Seas at Risk Working Group on Underwater Noise, and you have co-authored the report Underwater Noise, the Neglected Threat to Marine Life. We would like to know, why is underwater noise so dangerous and why is it neglected?
Yeah, thank you very much, Christina. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, thank you, and good morning, everybody, also from Bremen in Germany. And thank you for inviting me to speak here today. So the dangers, I would first go on your first part of the question, what are the dangers of it? Actually, Tonino already mentioned a lot of them, and they depend a lot on, it's not like one danger that exists. It depends on the type of noise. Is it continuous? Is it impulsive? It depends on the intensity, the distance of the animal to the source, the sensitivity of the animal to noise, the context. Is it already stressed? Is it feeding? And so on. So there are many levels, basically, of disturbance that come from noise. I will just mention a few to not be too long, but to sort of show the different steps that we can have. So the first one I would like to mention is displacement. So if noise comes, an animal would try to evade it, to go somewhere else. It would leave its feeding grounds or its habitat. And this displacement can be temporary, it can go back, but it can also mean that the animal is not feeding at that moment, or it can lose the other animals. A young one can lose its mother. So the displacement is not just something that is temporary and goes away, but it can lead to more stress, for example, or to unfitness. Noise can also mask other sounds that are vital. So the marine environment is not a completely silent environment without us humans. It is an environment of sound, and animals use sound to hunt, to find each other, to communicate, also to hear predators. And if human noise comes on top of that, we know that ourselves, if we walk along a very noisy street, we can't hear what other people are speaking. So they lose the sound that is vital to them. They might not be able to hunt. They might not hear a predator approaching. So this masking can also lead to unfitness, or it can even lead to death, for example, if some vital sounds are masked. And the worst of all, I mean, those that have seen the movie Sonic Sea, they will remember the very impressive pictures of those dead whales. So physical injury is the most prominent of these dangers that can come from sound if it's loud enough, if it's close, if the animal is sensitive to that. But the mammals are something that is the most prominent to us, but basically it's really all animals. It's been shown that even small crustaceans can just be erased. Basically all could die from one blast of one seismic gun. The young krill, for example, we all know krill from being whale food, but they are vital to the ocean, and one blast of one seismic gun could kill all the young ones of one population. So it's really, it's not just the big animals that we know and that we see, and that maybe then part of them arrive on the beaches, but it's throughout the whole ecosystem. It's a great danger. To your second part of the question, I guess we'll get more into that throughout the discussion. Just to say that we feel it's neglected in a way because, as was mentioned before, there are not many measures out there yet to really reduce sound, well, sound not, but the noise that comes from humans. And as I agree with Pierre that we do need more research, but we do, more importantly, need measures that reduce noise. And there are measures out there that could reduce it right now. So while we do more research, which I absolutely agree is really important, but while we find out more, there are measures out there that we can talk about later that could reduce noise tomorrow, today. If we do them, we don't need more research. There are best practices out there. If they were used everywhere, that would already be a big step forward. And that is what we really try to convey. We need to act, and we can act. That's the most important part of it.
Thanks a lot, Bettina. That was a great to get that background on what is actually the danger of underwater noise. And I would really invite you all to have a look at the report, Underwater Noise, the Naked Threat to Marine Life, which provides much more substance, of course, on these questions. But as you said, we have been doing research for a while now. It has been a part of the MSFD since 2008 to address that threat to achieve good environmental status by 2020, actually. Yeah, but like the research is still going on. The assessment, or there's attempts to assess underwater noise, but not really a reduction of noise. However, as we also heard before, I mean, in contrast to other pollutions like soil pollution or so, I mean, like the noise, you switch it off and it's gone. So it's not like it will remain there and it needs time to go away. So we could basically do measures immediately, and it would have an immediate effect. And Silvia Bartolini from the European Commission Marine Unit at DG Environment, I would now invite you to explain a little bit how you see this from the European Commission's perspective, and in particular, how we can move from assessment of noise pollution to the actual implementation of measures which will reduce underwater noise in European waters. Silvia, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tobias, and good morning, everyone. And thanks to Sarika for organizing this event today. And if you allow me the expression, for making some noise around underwater noise on the World Ocean Days, because it is indeed an issue that we feel is not much known by the wider public. And in order to deliver, we really need political ownership, and we really need to raise the awareness about the impacts of, let's say, underwater noise. And that is exactly what we are trying to do at the European Union level, and the Commission recently did with the Zero Pollution Action Plan, where a specific action is mentioned in relation to underwater noise, and where we say that we would like to adopt EU threshold values on underwater noise by 2022. So we give ourselves a deadline by when actions need to be taken. In relation to your specific question, I would like to make 3 points. And you were asking, how do we kind of go from assessment to measures? And I think that the first point is to recognize the steps that have been made until now in order to set the ground for those measures. And when I'm thinking to those progress, I'd rather say that it was mentioned by the chair of SEARICA before, until now we have gathered a lot of knowledge concerning the impact of noise. And that knowledge was also kind of reinforced by the fact that thanks to the MSFD, monitoring programs have been put in place in member states, and they have developed harmonized and coherent monitoring. And that is important. That has led to the creation, for example, of noise registers in the different sea basins, in the Mediterranean, in the North and in the Baltic Seas. And this is a real achievement, because without that, let's say, harmonized and coherent monitoring, you cannot then take action, because you need to monitor, report, and verify. So that is the basis for us to take measure afterwards. Then let me say also that through the MSFD, we have been financing several projects on noise at regional level. And those projects, and I'm thinking many of you know those, but I will not go into detail, but some of those projects are particularly important because they do test pilot project that we could kind of use as a test case, or that, let's say, as on which we can build in, let's say, drafting our measures. And one of the most known is, for example, Quiet Seas, but there are many other. I'm thinking, for example, to Helcom Blues, Quiet Med, CENOP. So there are many that have been kind of financed in the different sea basins. And then last but not least, let's say we have a technical group under the implementation of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, which is specifically dedicated to noise, and it is TG Noise. Many of you are part of that and have contributed to that. And so, I mean, but it is important that people outside know that there is a group that is, let's say, working specifically on that, and for which now we have decided really to beef up their job, to speed up, to go to a different gear, because the objective is that they will deliver threshold values at EU level on underwater noise by 2022. Of course, it's a lot of work ahead of us. And of course, threshold values, meaning limits, are, let's say, only part of that, because together with threshold values, you need to ensure that there are measures to achieve those threshold values. And those measures, as it was said before, are not only let's say, dependent on, let's say, environmental policies. Those measures need to bring together many policies, because we will need to discuss with the maritime sectors. We will have to see, let's say, with the energy sector. So it will require cross-cutting efforts in different policy areas. Finally, my last point is the fact that while doing this work at European level, we are not only, let's say, working in isolation. We are already working with regional sea conventions, because it is important, let's say, that we look also at the external dimension. So regional sea conventions are already participating to our group on noise. And let's say, while we discuss in the different fora, those regional sea conventions are waiting for the European Union to take a decision on EU threshold values in order to advance with the regional action plan. So again, the European Union leading by example, but let's say even more important that we deliver soon, because then we can influence other regional sea convention. And then I will not stop here, because I think that it is also quite important to recall that we also have to kind of influence the global level action, because also in the context of the IMO, there is a strand of work which should be launched quite soon about guidelines on noise shipping. And it is important that our work that we can do at EU level can be taken as a reference, or can be used to influence let's say, the work that happens in the context of IMO, because of course it has important, let's say, impacts worldwide, and also in order to ensure level playing field. So I will stop here, and then I'll be ready later on to engage in the discussion.
Thank you very much, Silvia, for giving us the entire scope of action from Commission to also the regional level, which is very important, of course. And now the link is already made. You have already mentioned the technical group on underwater noise. We have here Florent Lecourtois, who is working for CHOM, the Naval Hydrographic and Oceanographic Service in France, and he is co-chair of this technical group on underwater noise that Silvia was just mentioning right now. And our question for Florent is, as one of the co-chairs of the European Commission's technical group on underwater noise, you are at the heart of the MSFD, Maritime Strategy Framework Directive implementation and its obstacles. Could you provide an update on the current discussions and decisions within the technical group? And do you have an idea when this technical group's work will be implemented within the MSFD so that action is taken to reduce noise levels in the most seriously affected areas? Florent, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss about underwater noise in this group. Thank you as well for the introduction and for Silvia giving already a very comprehensive talk about MSFD. So I'm Florent Lecourtois, I'm working at CHOM, and I've been co-chairing the TG Noise group with my colleagues, Peter Segrave from Sweden and Fabrizio Borsani from Italia since last year, I think. It went quite quick last year, I don't remember very well. As already mentioned, TG Noise is an expert group from the European Commission to work for the assessment of descriptor 11, which includes two criteria. The first one is about impulsive noise, and the second one is about continuous noise. The group is gathering a lot of competencies regarding physical propagations on underwater acoustics, biological knowledge, biological sensitivities on marine mammals, but not only, on several other species or group of species, and as well as some ecological researcher and some stakeholders too are contributing to the discussion of the group. So I joined the group in 2016, but the group has been active way long before, even not officially. They are knowing each other and making progress in the knowledge on underwater noise. Several results were already achieved by the group. I think the main one, who was mentioned by Silvia, is the monitoring guidance. It is a major document to help member states to assess underwater noise. It has, I know that a lot of member states are using this document as a reference to define how to monitor underwater noise, including continuous and impulsive noise. One key priority of the group is still to be in capacity to deliver an ecosystem-based approach at national, transnational, and regional sea convention as well. It is important as noise is a transnational pollution. Regarding these technical difficulties, a lot of progress have been achieved. First, to provide a common understanding on risks associated to underwater noise. And as already mentioned, this progress were supported by research projects funded by the European Commission. Several have been already mentioned. And the work of the TG Noise is challenging, but is how to use this scientific knowledge in order to define a common methodology that could be used by all member states regarding all the complexity of the environment and the biodiversity in the European waters in order to implement a GES assessment. So the main work now of the group is to provide a common framework to assess underwater noise. So it means that we have to consider every specificities at regional level to have a common approach to define what is the methodology to assess GES in the North Sea, in the Baltic Sea, in the Atlantic, in the Black Sea, and in the Mediterranean Sea. We have to speak the same language in order to define the same threshold values, actually. So the last few years, the group has been strongly dedicated to understand how to assess in a coherent way underwater noise. So this is something going on now, and the pressure from the European Commission, so Sylvia mentioned 2022 to develop threshold values. So we are already working strongly to define this methodology. It's quite ambitious, but then it will allow us to have a common understanding on setting threshold values at a regional level and sub-regional level. So once we have the threshold values, measures will come to achieve these values. But it's quite ambitious. But I have to say that this ambition is already supported by several operational programs to monitor noise, as well as scientific research that are included in the work. And the last point is that the MSFD is a cyclic assessment. So whatever we propose, we want to go on something reliable that can support the decision-making processes. But MSFD is still cyclic assessment. So the improvement, the increase of knowledge, of scientific knowledge, will help to improve future work of the group. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Florent, for these insights in the work of the technical group on underwater noise. It's great to have you here and to get your researcher perspective as well. Yeah, there is questions are popping up in the chat, which is great. So I can only encourage you to continue bringing them in. And one is around if there shouldn't be a kind of synthesis of knowledge of all what we know already about underwater noise, but maybe that exists already. Maybe you would like to touch quickly on that because I guess you know everything about the knowledge that exists on the question. So the question was, now I have to find the question again. Question number one, isn't it a good time for a serious knowledge synthesis, a systematic review on what we know and what we do not know? But maybe that you have already. And if so, can it be shared? Russell, not Russell, sorry, Florent.
The knowledge has been strongly increased over the last 10 years, especially on a group of species that are not marine mammals. Actually, we are, and there are several review of that knowledge, especially regarding threshold values that are which kind of threshold values. They are starting to have review articles regarding the knowledge on impact on threshold values. So this is something we are considering when we are discussing among the group and how to get that technical knowledge to the decision making level. And something that is increasing a lot now is about measures. Actually, there are, as as mentioned by Sylvia, projects are considering more and more measures. So there are already several European funded projects on shipping mostly, and on pile driving as well. So.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think there is a growing body of research and of knowledge. And also Bettina just pointed me, of course, to the underwater noise neglected threat report, which was already mentioned before, which I think is a good kind of synthesized overview on the state of the art in terms of underwater noise. But of course, there is much more. Yeah, and exactly, you pointed out to seismic exploration, and we have a seasoned expert here with us on that question, Nicolas Entrup from Ocean Care. So Nicolas, can you tell us a bit more maybe about that particular threat? That was the sound we played in the very beginning, if you remember. It's a technology to search for fossil fuels, like oil and gas under the seabed. So why is that problematic in terms of underwater noise pollution?
Yeah, thank you, Tobias, and thanks to Serica for the invitation to this event and hosting this event together with CZ Risk. Let me start answering your question, Tobias, with reference to the exercise you've done quite early during this webinar. You asked people about what they associate with underwater noise. And when I looked at the results in terms of shipping, there were some references given to oil and gas, but they were all combined with the term drilling. So the reference in terms of the answer, oil and gas, drilling, yes, does generate and create noise. But when we refer to the impulsive noise of, the real concern, we talk about exploration, we're not talking about drilling. So here we start that the seismic air gun is one of the loudest human-made noise generating source in the ocean today. And it's used for searching for hydrocarbons, we know that. And I think we should recall that it emits sound from every 10 to 15 seconds with around up to 48 air guns simultaneously for 24 hours a day, weeks, several weeks, and sometimes even months. So when you recall that sound travels hundreds, even thousands of kilometers, you can just imagine that very close by, you have extreme problem for the individual exposed, but in the long range, we talk about, background noise levels increase by 100-fold in areas for, up to hundreds of thousands square kilometers. So that's quite impactful. The impacts and effects have already been raised here during the webinar, so I won't repeat them. We talk about impacts to the food chain, as Bettina pointed out, the impacts on krill, for example. We have socioeconomic impacts, which impacts on, fisheries. We have documented fish catch rates dropping dramatically in the Northeast Atlantic. So that should be probably of interest also to Pierre in terms of the fisheries impact. And we also have impacts on species and populations and individuals up to lethal impacts. So when you look at them in terms of, I believe you can address them from two perspectives. The first is as done by the, you can look at reducing noise to reduce the impact on wildlife, marine wildlife, by reducing it at source. And here it's interesting that Pierre also was referring to best practice. And when you compare, for example, the renewable energy sector, where some countries have imposed mandatory provisions or given incentives to invest into technology to reduce noise for pile driving, you have quite significant proof of a decrease of noise levels by certain technologies. But when you compare that to the oil industry, they still stick to the same method over the years, which is really highly harmful. The perspective to look at the reducing it as a source level and what the TG Noise is also doing with the recommendation of the noise registry. We hope, at least from that perspective, that at some point member states and the Commission will have an understanding of where seismic activities are planned. So meaning that the noise registry should become a management tool rather than just a monitoring tool. However, the other way to look at it is to look at it from a climate perspective, because we're talking here about exploring new oil and gas resources. And in a time when we talk about transformation of the energy sector, when we have the Green Deal, the biodiversity strategy, now the proposed Zero Pollution Action Plan, it's clear to us that we need to discuss a phase out and a ban of oil and gas exploration, which would have a multi-environmental benefit. It would help the climate. It would be in line with the Paris Agreement objectives, and it would help marine wildlife and protect it. So let me finish that some countries like Spain and France have already imposed a ban on oil and gas exploration in their national waters. We believe that should be a discussion coming up on European Union level. And here I'm fully in line with what Silvia said, that we should look at the topic also from the MSFD perspective to export it into the national arena, into multi-environmental agreements, into the IMO, etc. When we talk about noise reduction, the European Union, if it implements what it's supposed to implement, and its member states, would be a shining example for other countries and regions to reduce noise. So here we go.
Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you very much for that, Nicola. So that was a good overview for what it's what's going on when it comes to seismic exploration. As you said, people seem to be more aware of shipping and of shipping problems related to underwater noise. And we have someone who is an expert on that as well, Russell Leeper, working for the International Fund for Animal Welfare. You're an expert on continuous noise pollution, which is different than this explosion. It's happening all the time. It's happening from shipping. And you, Russell, is also a member of the technical group working on noise. So from your perspective, what needs to be done to reduce the ever-increasing shipping traffic noise in our ocean? I see that in the chat we already have an interesting debate on that. I have seen that someone was mentioning that GPI Oceans is preparing to launch a joint call on underwater noise in the marine environment. No, sorry, it was not that one. It was basically saying that we should launch a cooperation to handle the noise coming from ships. Maybe I can find it in the chat later. Someone else was mentioning slowing down as slowing the speed down of ships, which is also helping for climate reasons and protect whales. So these are a bit some food for thoughts already coming from the chat.
Thanks, Christina. I think those are all kind of good suggestions. I think we can kind of split what can be done to reduce shipping noise into kind of long-term and short-term measures. In the long term, underwater noise really needs to be considered in the design brief for new ships. And if underwater noise is considered within the design concept, then it can be greatly reduced without really affecting other aspects of the ship. So that's the most effective way of making quieter ships. But even if this was to start now for new ships, we still have the existing fleet for many years, and the typical life of a ship is 25 to 30 years. So in the short term, we need to take measures with the existing ships. There's kind of small things that can be done to improve the flow of water into the propeller, or keeping the hull and propeller clean, which will kind of help reduce noise on existing ships. But as was mentioned in the chat, and probably most importantly, as a short-term measure, is reducing speed. recent studies have shown that reducing speed is an effective way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and an additional benefit of that is greatly reduced underwater noise for most vessels, not all. And it's been estimated that a 10% speed reduction across the global fleet would reduce the total sound energy from shipping by around 40%. The IMO, the International Maritime Organization, will be meeting later this week to discuss whether to include underwater noise in the work program of its Marine Environment Protection Committee. And the IMO has a critical role to play in all of this because it's the global regulator for shipping. And certainly if the IMO was to increase the attention on underwater noise, then that could greatly help promote some of the measures that could be taken. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Russell. Yeah, very interesting insights in the noise from shipping. There is a remark in the chat as well that speed limits might not stimulate innovation into quieter ships, because then there is no point. You just slow down and then you don't need to change the engine or whatever. I guess that's the argument. However, going on to Herlinde van Houte, who is working for the Federal Public Service on health, food chain safety and environment for the Belgium government. And you've been working a lot on underwater noise from shipping as well in Belgium, as far as I know. Isn't it, what you also see from the chat discussion, an uphill battle if the number of ships and marine traffic is projected to grow even exponentially? I mean, Tonino Piccola said in the beginning that the blue economy is projected to double by 2030, which is massive, and of course, which will also mean more activity and many more ships, I guess. Do we just simply need less ships, or what are the measures you would propose from a Belgian perspective, Herlinde?
Thank you, Tobias, for passing me the word. Maybe you understand me all? Am I speaking loud enough? Okay, thank you. Well, maybe first to set the picture, Belgium is a very small member state in the European Union, and its marine area is even smaller. We have 0.2% of the North Sea. But however, we are very ambitious on having a good environment as well for our Belgian part of the North Sea. We're investing a lot in MSFD, and it's true on the first hand that regarding monitoring, we made a great progress during the first measure program of MSFD. That resulted also in a map on ambient noise, where you can see that for the Belgian part of the North Sea, we are like in a irrealistic case. We have a lot of noise impact in the whole area, and the only measures to have an impact on this and to get a better to get less impact of ambient noise, it will be a global solution, and it will be shipping is a global problem, and we are in need of a global solution on this. And it is true that IMO is the main level where we should negotiate this, but I really wanted to stress out that also IMO is in need of targets. And those targets, we will have to realize them at regional level. We will have to convince IMO on this. And if you look on a global level, I think that Canada made already big efforts. And I really think that the European Union and the regional sea conventions within Europe, they are key now. We have to act and we have to progress on it. It's very important. If we also want to maintain in the maritime sector a leading role, then now we have to work and to tackle underwater noise in the shipping industry. I recognize that for the maritime sector, It's a very competitive sector. An equal level playing field is key in this. So we have to respect this, but that does not mean that we cannot give leading examples to IMO for solutions that are working. Reducing the number of ships, I'm not very convinced that that is an evolution we can make. It's an efficient way of transport, that already. But I think as well that there are long time and short time measures, just like Russell mentioned already. Slow steaming is one of them. And we really should have leading examples on if this is working, because it is working. If we simulate it and it's in a hypothetical situation, then we can say that we are going to have less CO2 emissions and we're going to have less noise if we have slow steaming. It's not the complete solution. We know that on the long target, we have to design ships that are more efficient as well on energy level as on noise level. But we know that slow steaming is one of the measures that will help. It's not going to be the entire solution. What is Belgium doing now? We just had, we organized a webinar on this. We had a study who is investigating the potential for ships to reduce underwater noise, but as well emissions of CO2. And if you follow the IMO guidelines, then you're already you have already big progress in those two environmental problems. We are cooperating actively regarding our project on underwater noise. We are following also other European projects that are very relevant in this case. As a member state, it's so important that the European Commission is indeed taking a lead in this, but the member states have to support this, and they have to work actively as well towards their own stakeholders on national level as the multilateral or international level. And we really have to get the thresholds in 2022 in TG noise, and we really have to get action plans at the regional sea conventions regarding underwater noise. This is so important, and this will make a big progress. We know what we can do, and we just have to step forward. Also, from an economic perspective of view, or if you're going to look to the role we can have in IMO, it's so important that Europe is taking this step forward.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Herlinde. Yeah, we hope to have Jan-Christoph Oetjen with us as well, but of course he's the chair of the transport committee in the European Parliament, and I'm sure he would have very interesting things to say about maritime transport and underwater noise pollution from that source as well. But yeah, he apologizes because Strasbourg Week and Ocean Day and too much going on in parallel, I guess. But yeah, Christina.
Yes, I was just having a look whether MEP Karleskin was still on, but I believe that also because of the plenary starting, they had to both log off. But we had one question that we wanted to discuss more in general, and it was this idea which was already put forward by Pierre Karleskin also in his introduction. Sorry about that. I hope you could still hear it, which was this idea of quiet zones or limited zones. In German, it's called Verkehrsberuhigte Zonen, or living streets in English, which basically means delimiting some areas where either you have less ships or you have time frames where it is quiet. Maybe this is a question that we could discuss with the entire panel. You can just, by a show of hand, say if you want to take the floor on this from the Belgian perspective, or from the Commission's perspective, or from the NGO expert perspective, if anyone would like to react to this.
Yeah, and allow me just to add one aspect to this, a bit from a candid look at it. Like if I would imagine living in a street where there is a huge amount of traffic, then obviously the measure would be to reduce cars and not to wait until we measure it right or until we have more quiet engines in place or something like that. That's something which we can see on land all the time. Like too much noise from cars. Okay, let's reduce the number of cars. Verkehrsberuhigte Zone. So there is this kind of mismatch between that insistence on assessment and threshold values and understanding it really completely before we actually start implementing measures to reduce. So that was a bit of a provocation, of course, but I would love to hear what people think about that. And we have 2 hands up already. Well, I think Nicola, you were first.
Ladies first, please.
Ladies first. Okay.
You're a gentleman, Nicholas. Well, thank you. Then I will start. So I think generally this is a good concept to look at silent areas. For example, what we have to keep in mind is that sound travels very far underwater. So it might not be as easy as you think on land. You just like the street, you don't allow cars in that street. If you don't allow ships to go through an MPA, for example, but you allow them to go around, the sound of the ship will still be there. It will be less disturbance maybe than if they go right through. But as Nicholas was also saying earlier, like the sound of seismic explosions, it's heard 1,000 kilometers away. I always go back to an experiment that was done in the beginning of the 90s where they put big sound down in the Indian Ocean and they detected it basically everywhere on the world. And I think this is something we have to remember, that it's not as easy to create these quiet zones. We would have to really make a big area around it where we don't have sound. So it is maybe part of a solution to think up these areas, but on the whole, we really need to reduce sound. And that is one thing that I would like to say again. I said it earlier, and also maybe as a response to you, Florent, you were saying earlier, once we have the thresholds, we can start with the measures. But I think we can start with the measures now. We know we have too much sound, too much noise, and we need to reduce it. Of course, at some point we want to know how far we need to reduce it, but we can start, and we can start with these things like Russell was saying, reduce speed of ships. We have some best practices. Pierre was saying it earlier, best practices have to be used everywhere. We have the technique of bubble curtains, double bubble curtains, whatever, but they're used for pile driving. Why are they not used for explosions too? And this sort of bias between going on seismic explorations for oil and gas, if we actually have a climate strategy, I think we really, these things need to be done. As someone was pointing out in the chat, that doesn't reduce all seismic explorations because it's also used for other things. This has to be discussed, are there alternatives and so on, but there are things that we can already do today. And silent areas might be part of it, but it's not as easy as on land. Thanks.
Can I add directly, Tobias?
Yes, go ahead. And then I also would love to hear from Florent, who also raised the hand. So Nicola. Okay,
thank you, and thanks, Bettina. The quiet zone approach is, for example, a work stream in ACOBAMS, the agreement for the conservation of cetaceans in the Mediterranean, which is basically based on thinking where noise hotspots are. So you look at areas where very intense activities arise. And this is pretty much similar, the idea, I think, for the noise registry and understanding where intense noise activities are. So I repeat myself saying we need the approach of making the registry not a monitoring, but a management tool. And this goes in line with the marine spatial planning process. It's about planning activities in a way that you reduce the pressure in an area. And I think what it leads to, of course, is also identification of certain areas which are of extremely important use for certain species. But this includes the downside to it, that you just address it to some species rather than others. I mean, in that context, the the IMAs, the important marine mammal areas, would be such an approach when you look at marine mammals. But again, you then have a very selected approach rather than an approach from a wider ecosystem ideology. So yeah, that's to add.
Thanks a lot, Nicolas. Yeah, Florent, you also raised your hand, and of course, I think maybe would like to react on some of the stuff which was mentioned by Bettina as well on implementation.
Thank you. So to clarify, I want to support what Bettina said. I didn't want to oppose the possibility to settle measures and to use measures to achieve GES. It's something that has to be done in parallel for sure. And regarding quiet zones as well, Bettina pointed out very clearly that sound is propagating very far, and it depends on the environmental properties. Setting quiet zones in deep sea, for instance, in the Mediterranean Sea, can be more difficult than defining quiet zones in Baltic, because sounds will propagate much further. So we can define some kind for instance, let's define an important marine mammal area. Let's define one, and we can avoid ships passing by in that area, but it will not prevent from protect the area from shipping noise, because far away sources will still contribute in the noise in that area. So it's a complicated task, and it's something quite difficult in general in environmental science, marine environmental science, when you have a lot of uncertainties as well. But some of these ideas are starting to emerge from a scientific point of view. The Canada program was mentioned, like ECHO program, which is a very inspiring design to reduce shipping noise, and European scientists in projects in national coordination are starting to be inspired from what has been done in Canada. So we need tests, especially if we want to consider very large sea space, to make links with marine space planification as well. So this is something that be in mind, and that will lead to important measure program for sure.
Thank you very much for that, Florent. We also wanted to talk about a question that Herlinde has put in the chat about a new topic, deep sea mining, which is also, of course, very relevant. I don't know if Herlinde herself wants to say something about it, or in general, if someone from our panel would like to address this question. So maybe we can do just a round on that one. And also another topic that we have seen in the chat that we have not addressed yet is the military sector. So there was one question saying, how can the military sector's responsibility be addressed despite the legal exemptions? And is the sector already involved for noise reduction good practices to be communicated and implemented? So the two keywords here, deep sea mining and military sector. Herlinde, I see that you would like to take the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think regarding deep sea mining itself it's still in exploration phase, so it's not really developed as well. And I think for deep sea mining as well, the environmental impact is still is still being developed. What I just see that because deep sea mining is more in deep sea waters and is very often in areas beyond national jurisdiction, that you fall in another framework. And it's never taken into account if you talk about underwater noise. So I really think it's important to include it in this topic, even if this is not falling in our national jurisdictions. But I think it's really important that we take this into account. Secondly, regarding the military, it's true that they are exempted due to their activities from most of the environmental legislation, but that does not mean it's not there. I do think within NATO, but we are less familiar with this framework of working. But within NATO, there are guidelines regarding underwater noise. There are a lot of guidelines. It's just that we don't have a lot of information about it, how it is followed and how it is implemented. And we all do know that there have been incidents due to military activities, even during exercises, with a great impact on marine mammals, unfortunately. Yeah, we should find a way on how we can get more information on how they follow it without breaking the confidentiality of their activities.
Thank you very much for the input on deep sea mining and also for these reflections. I see that Nicolas Entrup is raising his hand as well to intervene. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. Sorry to come in again. Just on the military aspect, I really like to recall, because this is a CERICA event and the European Parliament has adopted a resolution already in 2004. We should, I think, recall that resolution, because that resolution was following numerous atypical mass strandings, predominantly Canary Islands, but also in the Mediterranean, due to naval exercises by applying mid and low frequency sonars. So once the European Parliament adopted the resolution, they called on a moratorium for high intensity active sonars until an assessment is done, understanding the impacts of such technology. And the conclusion, or the results of that, or the consequence of the resolution has been that the Canary Islands, the regional government, imposed a ban of active sonars in a certain area, including kind of a buffer zone, and no active sonar systems have been applied from that moment on, and no atypical stranding appeared since then. So you had a very positive consequence, but it wasn't replicated in other areas. So I think what we need to think about is here, when we talk about maneuvers, so basically in a no-war situation, you have and you should apply the flexibility to move out of certain areas. Right now, we have exercises in very deep waters, in the Hellenic Trench and other areas, which is highly dangerous for certain, for example, deep divers. And here you mentioned it, and Helene mentioned it, that, for example, when you look at NATO, the US military does, predominantly based on NGO action or legal action taken, but commit to avoiding certain areas. And we don't have that in European waters yet. So we need to look at this, at avoiding certain areas, but also negotiating with non-NATO members, because I think we should really think about the geopolitical impact of military interests. And so politicians and governments should think about making this an issue in high-level negotiations. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nicola. It was very interesting. So we are almost at 11, and it would be great maybe to hear once more from Silvia Bartolini from the European Commission. We didn't hear a lot from you in the exchange, but I'm sure you have interesting ideas, and maybe you got some inspiration from the exchange on how to address underwater noise pollution from the European Commission perspective. And I just saw also in the chat that there is a study by the European Maritime Safety Agency, which is under DG MOVE apparently, which also looks at exists an inventory of existing policy research and impact of continuous underwater noise in Europe. So that is maybe that kind of stock taking overview, which was also asked for earlier by our participant. So yeah, Sylvia, where do you take it from here towards 2022 threshold values? I guess that's the next milestone.
Thanks a lot, Tobias. Well, of course, I got a lot of inspirations, and let's say many of the many of the informations and many basically of the comments that were done by all the speakers were going in the same direction. Basically, here I think that what we can take from this chat is that there were no dissenting voice. I mean, the idea is we need to act. We need to act quickly. In order to act, we need to have threshold values, but we also know that while setting this threshold value, you already need to start thinking at the measures that goes with that, knowing, and I hear what you say, that there are short-term and long-term measures, and that it is possible already to do a lot with the current state of play and the state of art knowledge of what we have. Of course, we will have to then invest in research and then look at those, let's say, at the designs of engines and the new technologies that will allow us more in long term, but there is a lot that is already doable today. I think that another big take that I get from this discussion is that we have to build on what is happening, and we have to build it in a way that take into consideration the different regional circumstances, because there is not one size fits all solution, but it is important that while we work, we take our action, we do look wide, because it was said before, I mean, noise, you cannot restrict it locally. That is why it is important that we work with the regional circumventions. Those regional circumventions, let me say, are waiting for us, because I'm head of a delegation in OSPAR, and we do also attend the HALCOM, and both of them, I mean, HALCOM, both of them, for example, in OSPAR, they say, fine, we want to have our regional plan on underwater noise, but we want to wait that the Commission define its threshold values, because we want to build out of that. We don't want to create inconsistencies. So we need to that's hence, let's say, the pressures that we are putting to have threshold values, which are the step, they say step sine qua non in order for member states then to provide measures to us, because I mean, once they have these objectives, they will have to tell us in the program of measure how they're going to implement those. And the other big take that I have here, and I was mentioning that in the beginning, when member states will have to tell us how they're going to achieve those limits that we're going to put place, they will have to look wide. They will have to look at maritime special planning. They will have to look at what they do with the MPAs. They will have to look at how they regulate their drilling activities there. So I mean, the wind farm, let's think also, I mean, we have an offshore renewable energy strategy, which is let's say set to increase so how when you also install those new infrastructure. So there are many, I mean, the military, it was mentioned. So they will have to look wide, and they will have to look at the different sectors. And I think that is a little bit the big challenge that we have in this with this issue, because as always, you cannot regulate only by looking at one policy. You need the efforts of different policy to converge in order to achieve our objective. So we'll have to look wide, not only from the point of view of us being in the front, let's say in the front and leading by example, because when it gets to climate and environment, I have to say that the European Union has always been leading by example, and we should continue also in this front, leading by example in the regional circumvention in IMO, and then look wide when we kind of think at the measures. The reply will not be only in the environmental sector. We will have to look at transport, we'll have to look at energy, we'll have to look at defense. So really wide, and try to connect the dots. And that is where I think lays the biggest challenge, because that's where you really need to deploy more effort to convince the other. But I have to say that in this regard, the Zero Pollution Action Plan is a very good ally, because that is the link in the dot. And having a monitoring framework that obliges us to link the dot is, I have to say, one of the big objectives of the Zero Pollution Action Plan, together with the fact of looking at source And then also, and it was mentioned by some, with the idea of reversing the, let's say, the priority in terms of action. So first we do try to find remedy at the source, and then if it is not possible, we remedy, but then we also to start applying the polluter pays principle and start thinking that those that are polluting maybe are the ones that need to contribute to reverse the situation. So that is also another venue that I think we should be seriously looking into. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Silvia. You were summing up a bit all of the ideas, all of the main points, and I think you touched upon one which is very central to this. This is the cross-cutting dimension of the problem, of most maritime problems. And here we have also a proposal from DG Mare with the new approach to sustainable blue economy, which is the new matrix. So maybe this is also something that we have to keep in the back of our mind when talking about all of this. So thank you for pointing that out again. I had seen that Bettina had her hand raised. We are maybe very shortly, if you can give us le mot de la fin, final word. And we had one last poll for the participants. If you care to stay for 5 more minutes, maybe we can do that as well and then close the meeting. But Bettina first, le mot de la fin, the final word, and then we can just have a look at the poll and then we will let you go have lunch.
Thanks, Christina. I really don't want to take long because basically Silvia said a lot of what I wanted to say, but I would like to also add that I see the challenge of it, but I also see a great opportunity at the moment. And I was just looking at the chat really out of the corner of my eye while listening, and there were so many things that came up and we need to link with those, and this is happening there. And I think we need to use this moment now. Something is happening and rolling, and we should also see it as an opportunity that we can act really now.
That's a good mot de la fin. That's a good conclusion for our discussion. Maybe we can, Luisa, if you can help us to share the Zeetings again. Once more, like at the beginning, there is a link in the chat. You click on the link and you can answer the question that we are asking all of you, all the participants and speakers. What should be done to address underwater noise? Now we have heard so much. So what has stuck to your mind? Maybe we can keep it going for a moment to just see what's going on. Reduce at source, maritime spatial planning, communication to the public, consumption, awareness, create a business case for innovations, quiet air guns, maybe Tobias, you can harvest and conclude.
Yes. So yeah, it's much less, let's say, clear because people write more words and then it's aggregated in a different way. But it's really interesting. Quiet air guns is also interesting. So maybe less air guns, no air guns. Reduce at source, of course, that's very much at the center, and that's interesting. And also the link with marine spatial planning, which seems to be quite crucial. Like how do we organize that ocean space? Where can be sanctuaries, which can be used in a sustainable way for human activity? So I guess that's really the underlying question on a lot of how we relate to the ocean and how do we want to reshape that relationship. And yeah, I guess that's the end of that session. I'm really happy that this happened. It was a great collaboration with Christina and Sirika, and special thanks to all the speakers, of course, and to you all for your active participation and asking many pertinent questions and sharing resources. Today is a big day. It's Ocean Day. As many of you might know, we have a high-level event starting at 12:30, I think. You can find all the information on oceanweek.eu, and this is where we will assess the Blue Manifesto, which was launched last year by 6 leading ocean NGOs and supported by over 100 NGOs, which is a roadmap to a healthy ocean by 2030. And we did the first year assessment. It will be officially launched in, well, about 2 hours. Mrs. Vicheva, Director General of DG Mare, will react to it. So you are very much welcome to join this event. And Christina has also some information about what's next with CIRICA.
Yes, for CIRICA, I'm just going to post a link in the chat to see the upcoming events. We have a bit of a focus on maritime transport, which is linked to this problem and to many other challenges, opportunities, and trends also coming up. So the next event is on the decarbonization of the shipping sector. It is on the 15th of June, so next week, next Tuesday. And the other one, it's on wind propulsion, which is a type of maritime transportation, and it is on Thursday, next Thursday. So I would be happy to see you all during the next CIRICA session as well. Thank you very much for joining us today, to all the MEP speakers, participants, and have a very, very nice World Ocean Day, everyone. Bye-bye. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tobias and Christina.
Yeah, thanks to all of you. How was it?
It was good.
It was very good. Thanks a lot. It was very, very nice, and a lot of nice inputs. Have a nice day.
Let's follow it up from here.
Let's follow it up indeed. Bye.
Great. Thanks, Sylvia. Bye-bye. Thanks, Laurent.